All right. We are live, Inklings. And today we're going to be doing a little book club for the SPFBO 9 winner, Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. So let me just dive in a little bit and give a little bit of context for what this book is all about. And then we can talk about some rules on how we can collaborate on the indie rankings. So just want to dive right in. And kind of get started here. So I don't do lives a ton, obviously, but so just making sure, can everyone hear me okay? Truth, Justice, I see you in the chat. So thanks for joining. Good to see you here. I think it's working. I think it looks like the audio is working on my end. So I think we're just going to move into the context of what the book is all about. And then we can talk about how we feel it stacks up on the indie ranking scale. So, so we'll go over kind of some of that participation in just a minute. But this book is a classic murder mystery novel thrown into a fantastical setting, which I actually think lends itself pretty well to this genre. As I've said many times, there is a lot of bleed, I think, between fantasy and horror that I think both can kind of work well within each other's realm. I think fantasy does a good job pulling horror elements, and same with horror, obviously pulling in some of that fantastical stuff into their plot line. So lots of potential there. But basically, this story is about a woman hunting down a creature called a doppelworm, which can basically take the form of any person it kills. But when it takes their form, it also takes their memories, their personality. So it can inhabit them perfectly. So it's almost impossible to distinguish the difference between this creature, this doppelganger creature, and the original person. So, so she tracks this thing, this investigator, this hunter tracks this doppelworm into an inn, and she has to discover which of the inn residents is the doppelworm before it gets to the city and wreaks havoc. So that's kind of the setting and where we're jumping in to the story. So just to give a little bit of context for those who haven't read it, who might want to give it a shot, that's a little bit about what it's about. Just kind of a classic murder mystery with a fantasy twist on everything. So now, for those who want to participate in the chat and participate in the rankings, I just want to talk about some of the rules. They're pretty basic. It's not anything crazy, but basically, whenever I introduce a section of the indie rankings, I want you to drop what you think the score should be in the chat, as well as some of your reasoning behind your score. And while you're doing that, adding your scores and your reasoning, I'll simply go over some of the elements that I took notes on without giving my score. I'll wait till the end and see kind of what you guys were thinking before I share what I thought the score should be for that particular section. So I do have a score in mind for each of these, but I don't want to influence anyone in the chat and have any bias. So that's kind of why I want to structure it that way. So, okay, let's dive right into the immersion of the book or the world building. So the world building can be anything from religions, culture, landscapes, history, just anything that makes the world feel a little bit more tangible. For me, I felt like there wasn't really much to the world building beyond the manor itself, or this inn that all these residents are staying in. And there were a few things mentioned here and there in passing, but nothing that necessarily significantly contributed to the world. Like they would mention, that there was a war with some other nation, and that's where the colonel kind of comes into the story. They mentioned the different cities and their impact on the economy. So like they were like moments where they talked about different aspects of the world, but for the most part, the world is confined for this story to the manor. And the manor itself seemed to have a deep and rich history, because we get a little bit of that with the front desk clerk, and when she takes her back into the office, and the huntress / investigator is able to kind of investigate and see kind of what's going on in the room and kind of the history behind this inn, and we get kind of a sense of that, which is kind of cool. But I feel like we still only get glimpses of it, and we mostly get a taste of the world through the backstories of the different characters. So it often does feel a little bit fleeting to me. But again, I felt like the manor, the house itself, had a rich history. So those are the elements that are influencing me in my score that I've come up with. So yeah, that's my immersion overview. I don't have much else to say without obviously getting into spoilers or anything like that. I think because there are other creatures and other ghosts and other elements of the world that lend itself, but I'm just going to kind of keep it there for now. So yeah, Truth Justice, if you want to put your score in the chat, I'll see kind of what you're thinking, and we'll see if it aligns kind of with what my thoughts were. Okay, so Truth Justice gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Okay, that's pretty close to what I was going to rank it. So I gave it an 8 out of 10. And the reason why is because, again, I feel like the world doesn't necessarily need to have scale for it to be tangible. But yeah, I did feel like it was missing some depth to it. So I could see an argument for a 7.5, just in the sense that it did feel like it was missing some of the grander elements of the story. So, but what did you think? What did you think of the world building? Is there anything that kind of stuck out to you, or reasons why you would knock it lower than an 8? I waver between those. Yeah, 8 and 7.5. Yeah. I was kind of feeling the same thing, but I think sometimes my enjoyment, this is a little insight for me. Sometimes at the end, my enjoyment of the book can bleed into some of these other scores, or where if I enjoyed it for the most part, I can say, okay, if I enjoyed it, I feel like that means that the world building can get a little bit more credit, or that the characters can get credit. But that's kind of, I think, why I would bump it closer to the 8 status. But if you were to give it a 7.5, I would not argue that. I would definitely see the rationale behind it. So, okay. Now let's move on to the names and the characters of the story. So this is your chance to put your scores in the chat, give some of your reasoning behind it, and I'll just kind of talk over my notes of what I thought about the characters of Spindle Manor. So first, let me give just a little bit of context about my reading preferences. Sometimes I have issues with murder mystery novels, even the classics, even great murder mystery novels like Murder on the Orient Express, or, some of the movies that are, murder mystery oriented, like The Glass Onion, those types of things. Like, I sometimes have a hard time with those novels because the characters sometimes feel like caricatures to me rather than real people or real characters in the story, which works well for a murder mystery novel. Like, the people that like murder mysteries like that type of storytelling. They like the caricatures. So they have basic depth and nothing overtly complex about them. They're mostly a surface character serving a particular purpose within the mystery. So I understand that. And they have kind of, I don't know. So because of that, I feel like they have basic, kind of predictable personalities. And they do have mysteries layered within their personalities, with their past and their motivations. So for me, it's hard to really care about these characters a ton because I just feel like they don't have as much depth as I would want them to have, because they are these like caricatures. So, but I did like Isabeau, the main character, and Evie. Like, I liked them. I just felt like they were, I just felt like they were cartoonish almost, which again, maybe that works for this genre and this book, but that's kind of what I felt about it. So, Truth Justice, let's see kind of what you had to say about it. So, let's see. The overall tone was let's see. Farcical and thus the characters veered toward caricature. Yeah, I agree. I also felt there were some Scooby Doo vibes, especially as the action progressed. Yeah, you know what? That's a great analogy. I wouldn't have thought of that, but yeah, it did kind of. I think because it plays definitely more. I mean, I wouldn't say YA because it has elements that are more adult, but it kind of does feel a little bit like a Scooby Doo, who's the villain type of a book. So didn't bother me either. So I totally agree with that. Um, and it was mostly a plot driven novel. Yeah, we'll get to that in the infrastructure section because I agree with that assessment as well. Um, so yeah, do you have let's see. Do you have a score for let me see if you have a score for the names. 7.5. My score was also 7.5. So we are in alignment. You must understand my reading preferences at this point and kind of know where I'm going to rank things because that's two in a row where you've been pretty close and in this case dead on. So 7.5 is what I gave the names of this book, where they were good, but and they were entertaining. I'll say that. They were entertaining, but they weren't deep. They're not a study on human emotion. So, but they are very entertaining. It was easy to get to know them. You kind of have to keep them shallow for the sake of mystery because you have to unravel a mystery. You don't have time to like delve into deep emotional, connections with characters. So I agree with that assessment. So it doesn't necessarily detract from the story, but if you're looking for a character driven narrative or deep characters, I don't think this is necessarily what that book is all about. So okay, now let's move on to the magic, which can include things like the creatures or the fantastical elements to this book or the horror aspects to this book, which there were a few. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now. So I'm going to go into my reasonings. Go ahead and drop in the chat what you feel like this score should be, and we can kind of talk about that and see if we can reconcile or if we're off on anything. So the magic to me was interesting. The premise of hunting the doppelworm I thought was excellent for this story. The creature itself is a really interesting concept, and the mechanics behind it were very intriguing. So it does feel like a perfect villain or a perfect monster for the magic system or for this world. So, um, there were also seances within the book, and dealing with spirits was kind of a nice touch, adding in some familiar horror elements to the book. There was a creature that was like half human, half spider, which is called a malformed. And it was also kind of a terrifying entity within this manor. I would say another like technology slash magic to this book would be like the cyborg Colonel Thrall, which I thought was a cool concept, having it be like a steam engine cyborg as opposed to like a advanced technology cyborg. So I thought that was an interesting concept. Let's see what else there was. There was the concepts of astral projection, and how that tied in was kind of fascinating to the story as it kind of progressed, and we saw the influence of astral projection. And then, but I will say that for this section, it was mostly creature heavy. Like, other than the creatures, it didn't really have much magic. I would say, like the seance, I guess you could say was magic, or astral projection is kind of magic, but even then, we don't see a lot of it. So that's kind of where my thinking is when I'm giving this a score. So let's look at some of the comments and see what you were thinking on the magic. So I felt there were several twists and turns to the magic. Very true. Yep. It definitely kept things moving, kept things guessing, and things I didn't see coming. Same. Yeah. I did not see, I can't remember the character's name now, but the astral projection stuff I didn't see coming, which I thought was cool. Not sure everything hung together perfectly. Yeah. Again, I felt like it was I feel like it was a mishmash of different relatable things like ghosts um and cyborgs. So yeah, I could see there being a little bit of a disconnect there with certain elements. And then it kept me guessing whole way through. Yep. And then you gave it an 8 out of 10 for the magic. You know, so my score, I gave it an 8.5, but I wonder if that's too generous if that is solely based on the creatures and there wasn't. So I gave it credit because I felt like some of the creatures were very creative. Like the doll front desk lady I thought was creative. I thought the spider, half human, half spider thing was creative. I thought the cyborg being a steam powered cyborg was, or a coal powered cyborg was kind of creative. So like even though they're not necessarily new, it kind of was a creative kind of spin on some of these things. So but I wonder if it was too generous to give it an 8.5 as opposed to an 8. Yeah, don't let me influence you. Well, I want to make sure that I'm doing it's good to have checks and balances on my scoring system sometimes to see if I'm on the same page with people. So again, we're still pretty close here, where I scored it a little bit higher, but for this one, maybe I will bump it down to an 8 as opposed to an 8.5, just because I do feel like the elements were a little bit too familiar, and even though they were a creative take on it, maybe it needed a little more of a spin or a little bit more magic. So yeah, I think I am gonna bump this down to an 8. I think that's a good call. Um, the living doll reminded me of Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas. Ah, yeah. I was more in line with like Coraline, like the buttons over the eyes and like the lifelessness of them. Like that's where I was thinking for that character. So that character kind of gave me the creeps a little bit because that's where my mind went with the living doll. So yeah. But very good, good assessment of the magic here. Thanks for your input. So now we'll move on to the infrastructure. So let me just give my thoughts on that. Put your thoughts in the comments of what you thought about the infrastructure. Now, the infrastructure includes things like the plot, the pacing, the prose, just the mechanics of the book, and how they all flowed together from a just a editorial standpoint almost. So here is my thoughts on the infrastructure. Um, to me, it is a perfectly structured murder mystery. So if you're looking for a murder mystery novel, this gives you everything that you want out of a book like that. So if you like murder mysteries, I don't see where this has any flaws, but I also don't read a ton of murder mysteries. So I don't know that I can speak as an expert on this genre. I'm sure there are murder mystery people out there that can dissect this way better than me. But because I'm not someone that can predict endings or is very good at like trying to predict things. I just kind of go with the flow and let it unfold, which is part of the reason why I don't like murder mysteries is they're trying to like hint at things as we're reading. And I'm just like, it can get exhausting for me a little bit with murder mysteries. So I don't necessarily love that as a genre, but from a structural standpoint, I didn't see really any flaws to how this was structured. So I thought, from a full breakdown, it had good pacing, it had like constant tension throughout the story, it had high stakes where if they didn't catch this doppelworm, it could essentially wipe out an entire city if it wanted to, and it would get lost and never be found. Like this is their one chance to catch this creature before it gets unleashed on the world. And if they don't catch it, they could all die as a means of keeping this thing contained. So really good stakes. I felt like I felt like a good resolution and great reveals, kept me guessing. So to me, it was very, very satisfying. Um, so yeah, that was my assessment of the infrastructure of Murder at Spindle Manor. So let's take a look at what we've got in the chat. So overall, Drew says, overall, the pace was crisp and moved quickly, and it met every expectation I had for the story. question that was posed at the beginning? Oh yeah, yeah. So you gave it 8.5. Nice. Yeah. Um, nice. So Tiffany also hasn't read it, but it's on the bookshelf. So hopefully we don't give away too many spoilers. 8.5 to me, I think is a good score. I gave it a 9 out of 10 because, like I said, I don't know if there are any flaws with this book from an infrastructure standpoint. Like, I felt like it hit all the marks of a murder mystery where it hints at things, it has small reveals, it has a good build, it progresses pretty naturally. Um, so yeah, I think that I would stick with a 9 just because I don't see a ton of flaws with it other than like my own personal reading preferences. I don't, love that style necessarily, but I think 9 is where I'd put it. I might even go higher than 9. But again, I think just because of how sometimes she interacted with the characters, I felt like it was a little bit exposition heavy, especially with their backstories and stuff. So that's the reason why I took like a point away from it, is just for some of the um telling that we had to get through with some parts of the story that, again, I felt like were necessary, but I don't love that as much. So okay. Okay, you agree with that. Good. Okay. So let's stick with 9 on this one. Um okay. And then let's move on to the enjoyment of the book. So this one is going to be the most subjective. So um so it'll be interesting to see what people thought about it. But my enjoyment, uh okay. So I've said this throughout the review that I don't love murder mystery stories, movies, shows. They give me a headache and they all feel the same to me. Like, in the same way that I'm sure people can critique an epic fantasy book and be like, "Oh, well, there's going to be a chosen one and there's going to be a battle and they're going to defeat the villain." Like, I get that that is predictable and the elements of it. So it's just about like, what is your cup of tea? And for me, I don't love the mechanics of a murder mystery because I don't like trying to figure things out. I just want to know what's going on. Or I want to like have some breaks from the mystery with other things, which I don't feel like we really got a ton of. So they're fun, but they're not really my preference for reading. So I did enjoy it. I thought it was well written. I thought it was well structured. So I wouldn't say it was bad, and it wasn't like I was had a hard time reading it. I actually read through it pretty quickly. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at from an enjoyment perspective. Is it's not what I would normally pick up and read. It's good for what it is, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I really enjoyed it and finished it quickly. You gave it a 9 out of 10. See, I think that's fair. I think a 9 out of 10 is a good score. I think it's definitely appropriate. Again, if you like that type of thing. I had to give it a 7 out of 10. It just wasn't it's just not for me. I'm such a character-driven reader that I'm okay with plots, but I like there to be a marriage between plot and character that's done really well. Like Joe Abercrombie and the, First Law trilogy that he has great characters, but almost no plot. And so for me, that detracts from the story. Um, and so I feel like it needs to have more character. But again, it's such a small book that, again, I for what it is, it's perfect. If you're looking for a quick read, if you just want to like have a good murder mystery, I would recommend this to people. It's just not for me. So my enjoyment was a 7. Um, where like it was fine, but it's not something that I'm like gonna rave about and talk about, a ton. But it's nice to like have something that I can like recommend to people who do like that type of thing. So yeah, it is hard to find both in one book, which is why I tend to lean towards like the bigger books, like the 200,000 word books, because I feel like that's the only way you can get both aspects in a book. Like, anything by Brandon Sanderson is pretty good, where like he clearly has a plot and a direction, but his characters are also well fleshed out and have a good progression for their arcs. So Um, so yeah, that I tend to like longer books, so that's probably what another impact of um, what influenced my enjoyment is it was quick, it was small, so it did have to like kind of cut a lot of depth just for the sake of the pacing. So the pacing was great, the plot was great, characters for me were not super great, so it kind of faltered on that point. So yeah, you need a wider canvas to set the scene for those arcs, which is very true. So yeah, that's my overall rank. Well, let's see what the overall ranking is with all that in mind. So I'm just gonna add up the scores here, and then we'll take the average. So we did 8 for world building, 7.5 for characters, 8 for the magic, 9 for infrastructure, and 7 for enjoyment. See, you can't influence me on enjoyment. That's the only one where it's too subjective for me to get influenced. But yeah, I thought it was good. It was good. To me, it felt like an average read. Like I wouldn't pick up another book if it was a series in this particular universe, but I would understand if people liked this story. So I think the author could have put Isabeau's motivations toward the beginning instead of later on as it was done. Yeah, or folded in throughout even. I just feel like, yeah, again, it goes back to having kind of characters. Like she fit the character of an investigator, of a huntress, of a person who's like hardened and callous to hunting monsters. Like she fit that character well. And that's what allows us to jump right into the story because we know that's the trope and the character. So it allows us to kind of understand it without getting into her history. But yeah. Okay. So let's divide that by 5. Okay. So that leaves Murder at Spindle Manor with an overall ranking. I just have to take notes of this so I can remember this. Of 7.9 out of 10. So not too bad. I will say, so I'm making my way through the SPFPO winners, obviously. I've been a little bit disappointed with who has been chosen as the winners. I'm just going to say that to those who are here. I feel like the winners have been chosen based off of like what's different or what's unique rather than like what's good, like strong fantasy. To put this into perspective, this is the book that won over. So I read Petition by Delilah Wan earlier this year, and I felt like that was a way stronger candidate for the SPFPO awards than this one, and it was only a semifinalist. So that to me is a little bit strange, where I felt like Petition was at least grounded in like typical fantasy as opposed to like, oh, this is a murder mystery disguised as fantasy. So that's kind of and that's kind of how I felt about By Blood by Salt, where it was like a historical fiction disguised as fantasy. So I feel like the last 2 years the winners have been selected as what's unique, what's different, what's trending, what could set a trend, as opposed to like this is just a good fantasy book. So that's kind of my rant on the SPFBO based off of these 2 books that I've read, where they're good, but do I think they should have won? I don't know. I don't know if I think they should have. So I'm kind of struggling with that. But I am reading Reign and Ruin right now, which I can't remember which year that was the winner. That one's actually really good. And it's kind of like more of a romantasy, which I don't typically like, but it is done very well. I'm about 60% through that one. And so far, very, very good. And The Lost War was good too. That one I think got an 8.9. But again, that one was like there was mystery to it, but it was grounded in fantasy as opposed to like trying to like fit into another genre. So okay, let me take a look at the chat. Truth, I think that's a good score. I think so too. I think 7.9 is appropriate for this one. Tiffany, I'd love to hear more about who you would want to be the winners of that award in the future. I know. I might try to do that later on. I have so many submissions in my TBR. I've talked about how I need to restructure things a little bit, but I think eventually I will get to the point where I will read all of the SPFBO finalists of a particular year. I'm doing the Champions League right now, but eventually I might get to the point where I read all the finalists and then kind of am able to give my assessment of what I think would be the winner to me. But we'll see. Like I did read the Oathsworn Legacy um, for this SPFBO 10 award, which By Blood by Salt was the winner, and I felt like they were tied. Like their scores were the same. And I thought By Blood by Salt was better written from an infrastructure perspective and a character perspective, but the Oathsworn Legacy had better like averages throughout, where it didn't have as good of characters, but they were pretty good. Didn't have as good of infrastructure, but it was okay. But it had better magic, it had better character, better world building. So anyway, something for me to consider. It's interesting how it works out. People have widely varying views. Now, I loved By Blood by Salt, so there's that. Like By Blood by Salt was great. Don't get me wrong. I liked reading it. I just didn't feel like it was fantasy. I felt like I was reading a myth about the Middle East or something. You know, like it didn't have enough magic to it. If it would have had a dragon, or if it would have had a actual djinn or actual like sand monster, something, then maybe I could have given it more credit. But that really kind of, I struggled with it a lot. So I'm getting ready to start another of the SPFBOs. So maybe I'll pick up Rain and Ruin. I would recommend Rain and Ruin. So far, I mean, I haven't reached the end, but so far, fantastic. Thought it has been a great book. It's going to get, spoiler, it's going to get a high score from me, is what I'm anticipating. I never really know until I'm done with it. I kind of like put my notes together, and based off of my notes as I'm going through, I then give it a score based off of all the detractors and good things about it. Based off what I'm seeing, it's looking like, and I don't like romantasy, which is what this is. It is done very well. So it's gonna get a pretty good score. They moved the contest up. It starts in January, I believe, for 2025. I know. Yeah. It's just, I'm going to have to wait for the finalists for that one, because I need to get through these 10 champions and get this out of the way so that I can have a full YouTube video on that. But yeah, we'll eventually get to that point. I bought all 10, so it's looking at me right now on the bookshelf. Nice. Yes. They won't have finalists for a while though. Yeah, I think they don't have the finalists until like the summer or something, which I know because it takes so long to read through these books. You just don't expect it to take quite so long. But obviously just takes more time than you think. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts. We kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but also just wanted to judge the book by the cover. I thought the cover was pretty good, especially for the murder mystery aspects of it. So I think that this is perfect for what the book conveys. So I would give the cover a great score. I would say that it communicates well what you're going to be picking up. It does feel kind of elegant and interesting and kind of matches the time period. So, and then it doesn't really have any like other artwork, but the formatting is good. And I liked, I put on TikTok that I liked this chapter 13, that she didn't want to read it. And people on TikTok had very conflicting opinions on it. So I thought it was funny. I like those types of things, especially for the type of prose this was. I thought it worked well, but yeah, that's my overall of the cover. So not a cover facing book, but still pretty good. So we'll just put this one right here for now. So yeah, cover was good for that one, which, you know, sometimes the covers struggle for these indie books, but I thought that one did really well. Judges have to read 30. I know. I can't imagine reading 30 books in, what is it, 6 months that they're given? That's crazy to me. So yeah, I could not read. I mean, I think I've read like 30 so far, and it's been 9 months. So I would have to really push to get that done. But the spider is a spoiler. Yes. So is the lady too, kind of. Uh, a lot of them have a team to help. I've heard that. I interviewed Delilah Wan, and she mentioned that they have like a group of collaborators that help them um, judge the books. But I would have a hard time delegating that. I've never been good at delegating because I feel like even if someone knows my system, you just never know when there's going to be a wild card or if you're going to really like something. So, um, but yeah, and then yeah, I don't know. It would be it'd be interesting to be a judge for the SPFBO, but um, that's one of my goals at some point, but probably not for a while. Maybe in a couple of years, we'll see if we can get on the list. So you'd have to trust your team's opinion. Exactly. There are very few people that have reading preferences that are aligned with mine. I can think of like maybe one or two um, where I would feel confident giving them a story. And that's one of the things about the SPFBO where I feel like a lot of it is luck. Where like like Petition and Murder at Spindle Manor were in the same year. And depending on who gets your book depends on whether or not you're going to advance throughout the contest. So if you get someone who prefers romantasy and that person ends up with the list of epic fantasies, like they're going to pick whatever romantasy kind of comes into their realm as opposed to like what's the best epic fantasy or what's the best like new fantasy or whatever. So I do think luck does play a role in it. Like if I was a judge, epic fantasies are going to get a higher score for me because I prefer reading those types of books. Like I would not have chosen Murder at Spindle Manor. I probably wouldn't have chosen By Blood, by Salt. But you know, that's just shows that these are all really good books, and it just comes down to preference. It comes down to a little bit of luck, and yeah. So, that would be great. Yeah. Yes, just luck to get to the judge who vibes with your book. Exactly. So I don't know how they divvy up the contest, but I feel like, and so I can't speak to it because maybe they do this, but I feel like they should make the categories part of how they split up the story. So someone should be over epic fantasy, someone should be over romantasy, someone should be over, murder mystery, someone should be over, whatever the different like urban fantasy, like there should be categories for all of these different books. And then whoever likes that style of book the most should be the one putting forth like, hey, I'm the urban fantasy judge, and here's what I would put up against any epic fantasy, against any romantasy. Or I'm the romantasy judge. Here's the book that I would put up against any of these other categories to win. And then we would be able to see like, okay, out of all the romantasies, this is the one that the romantasy expert has chosen. Or out of all the epic fantasies, here's the epic fantasy book that has been chosen. And then they have to decide as the 10 judges, what is the best genre to win that year. I think that would be a better approach in my opinion. But that makes a lot of sense. I think judges can request books based on the blurbs, but don't quote me on that. Interesting. But a request doesn't mean they'll get it to judge. Yeah. That's another thing. I feel like a lot of self-published authors need to work on their blurbs a little bit. I feel like blurbs are one of those things that, especially for potential readers, especially for judges, like it has to be quick, it has to be engaging, it has to be good. A lot of the blurbs that get sent to me are not that way. They're kind of generic, or they don't get to the heart of the story, or they don't explain the stakes very well. So that might be a part of the problem as to why maybe better books aren't getting selected. So if that is the case, I know you already have a few years worth of books in queue, but methinks you'll really like Illborn based on your love of King's Paradise. It was a finalist a few years back. I think people have recommended Illborn to me before as well. So I think that you're right. So that might have to be one that I put on my list. as just kind of to sprinkle in throughout the submissions, just because like the two that the one series that I really want to get to that has been recommended a lot is Gunmetal Gods. I think that one would be kind of right up my alley. And it looks different and it looks kind of cool. So that one's been one that's I've been itching to read a little bit, but thank you for the recommendation because I did love Kings of Paradise. I really want to finish that series because it was so I loved Ruka. Ruka was one of my all-time favorite anti-heroes so far. I love when a character actually gets vengeance or actually like feeds their inner demons as opposed to like taking the high road. So that's probably why I like them so much. Blurbs are so hard. I'm terrible at them. I think a lot. I mean, obviously, a lot of indie authors are and self-published authors are. Maybe that'll be one of my writing classes that I do. Is just how to write a very concise, interesting blurb that can catch attention. I don't know that it will be any value because again, it's just based off of what I've seen from people. So, we'll see if maybe that's something I can put on the list. I want to read Kings of Paradise after your review. I would highly recommend it. It's just I think a lot of the issues people have with it for the people that don't like Kings of Paradise, it's because it has two separate worlds that you're reading about, two different perspectives and POVs, and they never come in contact with each other. They do at the very end of the book, but it's almost like the last page. It's alluded to that these two different worlds are finally going to interact. And I think people had a hard time with that from an infrastructure perspective, which I can totally understand. To me, it didn't matter because again, I'm character driven and the characters of that book were phenomenal. The overall story and plot was really good. So yeah, I would recommend Kings of Paradise to anyone. So yeah. So yeah, I think that will pretty much do it for the live today. We've officially rated and put Murder at Spindle Manor on the shelf. And I did get influence to change one score, thanks to Truth Justice in the chat here, because I did feel like they had a better score for one of the categories. But yeah, it's been fun. So thanks for participating. I hope that we can do a little bit more of these in the future. We'll have to see what my schedule looks like and what we can do for some of these lives. But yeah, it's been fun, and I'm glad that we got to do this and celebrate 1,000 subscribers and set up a new studio for us here that'll fit some more books. So I'm excited for what's coming up. So thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the congrats. I'm happy for the 1K. I'm happy to keep moving things forward, and 10K is the next goal. So I don't know if we'll wait for a live till 10K because that probably won't come for a while, but that's the next thing that we're going to shoot for. We're going to try and create some valuable content to get subscribers that will hopefully be valuable to people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So thanks so much for watching, and yeah, we'll just see you in the next video. So appreciate anyone that joined the live today and anyone that's watching this afterward. So let me know what you think in the comments if you think we should have changed anything if you weren't able to join live. And yeah, appreciate all the Inklings that are part of the Indie Fantasy Club. So a monthly book club live would be cool. Okay, maybe. Maybe I'll do that and just mention which books, we can talk about on a monthly basis. Yeah, I think we could do that. And just let people know maybe the popular indie fantasy books so that I'm not making people, buy or read books that I haven't vetted. But if other people have a consensus that it's pretty good, I feel like that might be more safe. So that's definitely a possibility. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I will catch you in the next video. It will come on either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Well, it's going to be a review of Rotten Gods, which again, another spoiler. I did really enjoy that one. So if you're looking for another book to pick up, spoilers, but that's a good one. So that one's coming soon. But until then, I will see you guys all later. Have a good one.